It was meant to be just another ordinary evening. Tom and I had arranged to spend some time together, enjoying games and unwinding after a hectic week. It wasn't anything major, yet upon arriving at his house, there was an unmistakable sense that something had shifted. Perhaps it was merely my perception, or perhaps it stemmed from the reality that I hadn't encountered Laura, his mother, in quite some time. There was an undeniable sense that something about her had shifted this evening. I entered the room, and there she stood, immersed in the task of preparing dinner in the kitchen. As always, she welcomed me with a friendly smile. "Hey Jason, how are you doing?" she inquired as she typically did. "Greetings, Mrs. Laura," I remarked, mirroring her smile. "All is well, just the typical happenings, as it has been quite hectic." She nodded, her focus unwavering as she stirred the contents of the pot on the stove. "Absolutely, I understand. It feels like I'm constantly on the move these days." I lingered for a moment, observing her, pondering what it was that stirred these feelings within me. A subtle change lingered, imperceptible yet palpable, as if the atmosphere itself had decided to whisper secrets. Perhaps it was merely my imagination, yet there was an undeniable tranquility about her this evening. Something more relaxed. I cast a quick look at Tom, lounging on the couch, controller in hand, utterly engrossed in the game before him. Standard. As I ventured deeper into the room, Laura's voice broke the silence once more. She remarked nonchalantly, as if the thought barely crossed her mind. "Lately, I've been experiencing quite a bit of discomfort in my back. I'm not sure if it's due to spending all day at my desk or something else, but it's been quite challenging. Every slight movement sends a jolt of sharp pain through me." I halted, slightly taken aback. She had always been so composed, it was surprising to hear her voice any discontent about such a matter. Indeed, she was perpetually occupied, diligently laboring, attending to Tom, managing everything. However, I was unaware that it had deteriorated to this extent. "That seems challenging," I remarked, shifting to the kitchen table and taking a seat. "Have you attempted anything for it? Perhaps a heating pad or something similar?" She shook her head, a clear sign of her frustration. "I have explored every option available. Nothing seems to be making a difference. It has only been deteriorating, you understand?" I paused to reflect on it for a moment. I may not have been a professional, but I had gathered a few insights along the way throughout the years. I once assisted at a gym, and I had a fair grasp of how muscles functioned, even though I wasn't a specialist. I had given a handful of massages to friends and family previously, primarily just for enjoyment. However, it wasn't something I typically provided unless someone inquired. In a moment of spontaneity, I discovered that I was speaking. "Sure, I can offer you a brief massage if you'd like. Could provide some relief from the discomfort." She paused her activity, glancing at me with a hint of surprise in her eyes. "Excuse me, what did you just say?" I chuckled in a somewhat uncomfortable manner. "Well, I'm not exactly an expert, but I've certainly dabbled in giving a few massages now and then. If you're willing, I can take a crack at it. Could alleviate the strain." She took her time to reply. She gazed at me for a few moments, as if contemplating something deeply. It was hard to hold her accountable. We didn't share that kind of closeness. I was merely an acquaintance of Tom's. Yet, I thought it might be worth a try. After a moment's hesitation, she ultimately offered a slight shrug. "I suppose it's worth giving it a shot. What's stopping us?" A sense of relief washed over me, yet I couldn't shake off the lingering awkwardness. I found myself questioning the reason behind my initial offer. I wasn't attempting to derive anything from it. Yet, I found it impossible to remain still, fully aware of her suffering. I guided her into the living room, where she settled onto the couch. I took my place behind her, standing with my hands hovering uncertainly at her shoulders. She appeared hesitant as well, yet it didn't seem like the appropriate time to withdraw. I rested my hands softly on her shoulders. Right away, I sensed the rigidity in her muscles, the strain from the countless hours she had dedicated to her work at the desk. Her body was taut, wound up like a tightly coiled spring. I applied just the right amount of pressure to begin easing the knots, mindful not to go too far. Laura released a gentle sigh while I continued my work, her body gradually unwinding beneath my hands. "That truly feels wonderful," she murmured, her tone gentler than normal. I had no idea just how serious it was until this moment. I felt a warm sense of satisfaction, pleased to have made a contribution, no matter how minor. I'm pleased to hear it's making a difference. The stillness in the room lingered as I focused, with the only interruptions being the sporadic buzz of Tom's game and the gentle rhythm of Laura's breathing. An unusual, yet serene quiet enveloped us, and inexplicably, I discovered myself focusing on her more than I ever had in the past. Her gentle sighs, the way her body relaxed beneath my touch, it felt unique, more intimate. While I worked my hands over her shoulders and back, an unforeseen bond began to blossom between us. Being this close to her was unusual, the way I touched her felt more intimate than anything I had ever experienced. Yet, it also didn't seem out of place. It felt effortless. "Wow," Laura murmured after a few more moments, her voice barely a whisper. "This is truly beneficial. I never expected it to feel this amazing." I took a brief moment, giving her the space to unwind fully. "I'm glad to assist, just tell me if it becomes overwhelming." Her body surrendered completely, the tension gradually dissipating. I completed the massage, allowing myself to linger a bit longer than necessary, ensuring that every last bit of tension in her muscles was fully released. As I took a step back, she pivoted to meet my gaze, her expression gentle, her eyes slightly unfocused. "Thank you, Jason," she said, her voice soft yet heartfelt. "That was truly beneficial. I am feeling significantly improved now." "Of course," I replied with a grin, attempting to mask the peculiar flutter of something within me. "I'm pleased to have been of assistance." The silence hung in the air, thick and uncomfortable, a palpable tension that was hard to ignore. The atmosphere had shifted, losing the relaxed vibe we once enjoyed. Now, there existed an unarticulated connection between us, a deeper layer that lingered in the silence. As I settled back into my seat, I attempted to concentrate on the game once more, yet my thoughts continually wandered back to Laura. What was happening in this place? What was it about this seemingly minor act that made everything feel different? Throughout the evening, an unsettling sense lingered, as if everything had shifted in an unrecognizable way. I couldn't quite grasp its significance, yet there was an undeniable sense that this moment would linger in my memory for a long time to come. The evening unfolded, yet it carried an unusual essence. I attempted to concentrate on the game, yet my thoughts continually wandered back to the moment I had just experienced with Laura. The silence in the room weighed down on us, as if an unseen force had altered the space between us, leaving me with a sense of confusion I couldn't quite grasp. Once the massage concluded, I returned to the couch where Tom remained engrossed in his game. He appeared oblivious to the shift. As always, he was completely engrossed in his game, a broad smile spreading across his face as he accumulated points or whatever it was he was engaged in. I attempted to smile and engage, yet my mind continually drifted back to Laura. Laura sat at the kitchen counter, savoring her wine, and I couldn't help but observe the striking change in her appearance. She exuded a serene presence, accompanied by a gentle grace in her movements. It was hard to put into words, yet there was an undeniable sense of vulnerability about her. For a fleeting moment, the tough exterior she typically maintained, the one she reserved for Tom, faded away, and I found myself unable to overlook the emotions it stirred within me. I rose from my seat, extended my limbs, and made my way to the kitchen. I sought an activity, a diversion to pull my mind away from the persistent memories of Laura. As I entered the kitchen, I discovered her there, gazing out the window. "Are you feeling improved?" I inquired, uncertain if it was the appropriate question to pose. She glanced my way, a subtle smile playing on her lips, her wine glass still cradled in her hand. "Significantly improved." Honestly, I never expected it to have such an impact. I nodded, feeling uncertain about how to reply. "I'm pleased to hear it was beneficial." She lifted her glass for another sip of wine, then placed it gently on the counter, her gaze still fixed on me. In her eyes, there was a new depth, an elusive quality that I struggled to identify. Could it have been appreciation? Or perhaps it was something deeper? I was unaware, yet it stirred a sense of unease within me, as if I stood on the brink of an uncontrollable force. Jason. She began after a momentary hesitation. This caught me off guard. I suppose I shouldn't have anticipated that from you. Her voice faded, and she shook her head slowly. A knot twisted in my stomach. Did she feel uneasy? Perhaps I had overstepped my bounds? Yet, I found myself unable to shake the feeling that I had committed no wrongdoing. I had merely extended my assistance. I didn't intend to create any awkwardness, but perhaps I was just overanalyzing the situation. Text, I quickly urged, attempting to dismiss the moment with a wave of my hand. I aim to assist. That concludes everything. She offered a subtle, almost knowing smile before turning her gaze back to the window. A lengthy silence hung in the air before she finally broke it with her words. Your intention to assist is clear, and I truly value it. I genuinely do. She hesitated for a moment, then spoke gently. However, I suppose I'm not accustomed to having someone look after me in that manner. The fragility in her voice resonated with me, and for a fleeting instant, I felt an urge to connect with her. However, I held back. That wasn't my role. She was Tom's mother, and I was merely the fellow who had found himself staying at their home for the evening. Nothing else. What was it that made me sense a deeper connection between us at this moment? We lingered in silence, both uncertain of the words that should follow. The air between us crackled with an unexpected intensity, leaving us both at a loss for how to ease the strain. I sensed a delicate tension in the air, and the burden of it all felt overwhelming. At last, I shattered the stillness. If there's anything more you require, feel free to reach out. She nodded and said she'd be in the other room, and I could tell she was also grappling with the aftermath of what had just occurred. Just as I was about to pivot and head back to the living room, her voice cut through the air once more. Jason, I'm uncertain about my current path, she murmured, her voice almost inaudible. I came to a sudden halt. Could you clarify what you mean? Her gaze met mine, a blend of bewilderment and an unidentifiable emotion flickering beneath the surface. Honestly, I'm not quite sure what's happening. You've always been known as Tom's friend. However, following tonight, I'm uncertain. It has a unique quality, and I'm uncertain about how to navigate it. A sudden jolt coursed through me, accompanied by a whirlwind of feelings I wasn't prepared to face. This was a realm yet to be explored. This was an unprecedented moment for me, and it seemed as though the world was whirling by at a pace I struggled to match. I understand your perspective, I confessed, striving to maintain a calm tone. I sense it as well, yet I prefer to avoid any awkwardness. I'm not here to make things more difficult for you, Laura. Her smile graced my presence, and in that fleeting instant, it seemed as though all was right in the world once more. I don't want to complicate things either, she murmured gently. Yet, it's difficult to avoid feeling something in your presence. The revelation struck me with an intensity one hadn't anticipated. In that moment of uncertainty, I found myself longing to vanish completely, to dissolve into nothingness. However, I was unable to. We stood together, fully aware that there was no way to retreat from this moment. Text, I am unsure of what this signifies, I remarked, my tone laced with apprehension. There's no need to solve it at this moment. We can proceed at a leisurely pace. She nodded, and I could sense the relief washing over her. Yet, within her gaze, there lingered a glimmer of uncertainty, perhaps even a hint of trepidation. It was evident that she was grappling with this challenge just as intensely as I was. All right, she replied gently, taking her time is fine. I lingered for a moment longer, the atmosphere heavy with unexpressed feelings, before I pivoted and made my way back to the living room. A moment was necessary to fully absorb everything. Uncertainty enveloped me, yet one truth stood clear in my mind. Everything has certainly changed now. The evening lingered on, stretching out in the wake of our talk in the kitchen. I attempted to concentrate on the game once more, yet the peculiar tension between Laura and me was difficult to overlook. something appeared to take notice. He was completely immersed in his game, chuckling and chatting about everything happening in the realm of virtual racing. Yet, from time to time, my gaze would wander to Laura, and I would notice her glancing at me from the periphery of my vision. The air was thick with unspoken words, a lingering heaviness since our exchange in the kitchen. It felt as if we were both putting on a facade, acting as if nothing was different, despite the undeniable shift that had occurred between us. A sense of restlessness washed over me. A fragment of my being yearned to delve deeper, to unravel the chaos unfolding around me, yet another fragment quaked with fear. This was not part of the plan. I was merely a friend to Tom, nothing beyond that. Yet, there was an undeniable shift in the air, one that I could no longer overlook. The thought of departing, of creating space between us, felt utterly unthinkable. At last, Tom took a break from the game as the clock struck midnight, extending his arms and letting out a long yawn. He stood up from the couch and looked at me, saying, "I'm heading to bed. It might be a good idea for you to rest as well. You'll want to have it if you're planning to join us for breakfast in the morning." I nodded, though uncertainty lingered about whether sleep would come my way. My mind was overflowing with thoughts of Laura. Yet, I managed to muster a smile and replied, "Sure, I'll be there shortly." Tom strolled away to his room, and an unusual stillness enveloped the house. Laura lingered in the living room, her back turned to me as she busied herself with her phone. For a brief moment, I paused, caught in a dilemma about whether to speak up or retreat to my own space and attempt to drift off, hoping to escape the mounting tension. Yet, as she began to speak, her voice gentle, it pierced through the stillness. "You know, Jason," she started, pivoting to look at me. "It brings me great joy to have you here. Lately, I've been feeling somewhat out of sorts, and your presence has truly been a comfort." I found myself puzzled by her words. Was she merely exercising courtesy? Or was she truly sincere? A part of me yearned to trust her sincerity, yet another part of me doubted if I was overanalyzing the situation. "I'm pleased to have been of assistance," I responded, aiming for a laid-back vibe. "I've really enjoyed spending time with all of you." Laura smiled, yet a glimmer of something more profound danced in her eyes. She gazed at me for a moment, as if she were examining every detail of my being. She averted her gaze, her fingers fidgeting with her hair. "I'm feeling a bit lost, to be honest," she spoke, her voice now softer. "Lately, I've struggled to open up to others, but your presence makes it feel more manageable. I can truly unwind and embrace who I am." Her words struck me with an intensity one hadn't anticipated. A flaw existed within them that I had not foreseen. Laura, the resilient and self-sufficient woman who always appeared so composed, was beginning to reveal her vulnerabilities. And I was the one who had caused her to feel that way. In that moment, a profound sense of duty washed over me. She revealed her thoughts to me in a manner she had never done with anyone before. I was determined not to ruin it. "It brings me joy to know I can evoke such feelings in you." I moved a fraction nearer, ensuring there remained a comfortable distance between us. "It's important for you to experience a sense of calm and ease." She offered another smile, yet this one appeared tinged with a hint of doubt. "Thank you, Jason. Your understanding of its significance is beyond measure." A lengthy silence hung in the air, and for a fleeting moment, I contemplated whether I ought to break it, to utter something that might alleviate the palpable tension. Just as I was about to speak, she abruptly rose from the couch and stretched her limbs. She spoke with a light tone, yet I could still detect an undercurrent of something deeper in her voice. "It might be time for me to retire for the night. I have work scheduled for tomorrow." I nodded, feeling a sense of uncertainty about my next move. "Absolutely, I feel the same way." Yet, as she advanced toward the hallway, she paused and pivoted to confront me once more. "Jason, I realize this might seem a bit unusual with me being the mom and you being Tom's friend," she said, her expression slightly flustered. "I just want you to remember that I'm always here to listen, okay?" A gentle warmth enveloped me at her words. She wasn't making any promises, yet there was a certain openness in her voice that suggested this unusual connection between us might not be something to fear. "I'll remember that," I replied, my tone gentler than I meant it to be. She offered a final smile before disappearing down the hall, leaving me solitary in the living room. The house had grown still, yet the atmosphere between us crackled with tension. I found myself pondering whether this night, and all that had transpired between us, was an indication of something deeper, or merely a transient experience that would vanish with the dawn. I made my way to my room, thoughts swirling in my head. I attempted to find comfort in my bed, yet slumber remained just out of reach. Each time I shut my eyes, Laura's visage appeared, her voice echoing in my mind. A part of me felt an inexplicable pull towards her. Yet, I was acutely aware that this was far from a mere innocent attraction. A profound undercurrent existed, an undeniable force that neither of us could overlook. As I reclined, gazing at the ceiling, a sense of curiosity washed over me about the direction this would ultimately take. Did I merely serve as a fleeting diversion for her? Or was there an underlying truth, something we both had yet to fully confront? While I lacked the solutions, one truth stood out unmistakably. The dynamics between us were shifting, and neither of us could return to how things once were. The following morning, I rose early, the weight of the previous night still lingering within me. I found myself awake a bit later than normal, lost in contemplation about all that had transpired. It was unusual for me to dwell on thoughts, yet last night had a distinct quality that set it apart. I became increasingly attuned to my emotions, particularly regarding Laura. A fresh depth of comprehension had emerged between us, and it was impossible to overlook. When I made my way downstairs, Laura was already awake. In the kitchen, she moved with an elegance that made the act of preparing breakfast seem like an art form. Yet today, there was a gentler quality to her, a sense of ease that seemed to envelop her. As I entered, she drew my attention, and once more, I experienced that peculiar attraction. "Good morning," she said, her smile radiating warmth as she turned from the stove. "Did you rest well?" "Sure," I responded, even though my emotions were a bit unclear. It wasn't merely the lack of sleep that left me feeling somewhat disoriented. It encompassed all that was beyond. "What about you?" "Improved," she remarked, a soft sigh slipping from her lips. "The massage you provided was truly beneficial. Today, I sense a notable reduction in my tension." I felt a sense of warmth as I offered her a gentle smile. "I'm genuinely pleased that I was able to contribute in a meaningful way." She nodded, yet an unspoken pause lingered in the air between us. It wasn't precisely uncomfortable, yet there was an unmistakable awareness that something had changed between us. Neither of us was prepared to confront it directly, yet it lingered, palpable in the atmosphere. Tom finally made his way downstairs, a yawn escaping his lips as he entered the kitchen. "Good morning, everyone," he announced, his familiar enthusiasm unwavering. "Good morning, sleepyhead," Laura playfully remarked as she placed a plate of eggs and toast on the table. "It seems you're burning the midnight oil with your gaming once more?" "Guilty as charged," he remarked with a playful smile. "Do you understand what I mean?" I observed their interactions, the effortless, comfortable cadence of their bond. It was pleasant to observe, yet I found myself feeling somewhat like an outsider. This morning brought a sense of belonging that I hadn't experienced before, a feeling of inclusion that was different from Tom's deep-rooted connection to the family. We shared breakfast, engaging in casual conversation about the most trivial things. Tom continued to deliver his punchlines, and Laura found herself in fits of laughter. As I sat there, I couldn't help but observe how Laura would steal glances at me when she believed I was unaware, and how her smile appeared to carry a hint of authenticity. The change was understated, yet I sensed it, causing my heart to quicken slightly. Following our breakfast, we chose to enjoy the remainder of the day in each other's company. Laura proposed a stroll in the park, a favorite activity of hers for refreshing her thoughts. I consented, not out of a deep affection for walking, but rather because the thought of sharing more moments with her intrigued me, allowing us to connect beyond our typical interactions. The three of us strolled through the park, the early spring air crisp yet invigorating. We engaged in a delightful conversation covering a variety of topics, from Tom's school projects to Laura's work, and the peculiar little details of life that frequently escape our notice. The dialogue flowed effortlessly, and for the first time in ages, I sensed a release from the tension that had been accumulating within me. Laura and I shared a brief interlude while Tom dashed off to join some friends. She offered me a smile, slightly more subdued than her norm, yet her eyes radiated warmth. "I'm so pleased you're here," she murmured gently. Having a companion to converse with, someone who genuinely pays attention, is truly wonderful. I expressed my joy at being present, the authenticity of my statement resonating within me. "I'm pleased we're sharing this moment," she nodded, her eyes resting on me for a brief instant before she shifted her focus to the trail ahead. A subtle connection lingered between us now, an unspoken bond that had eluded us previously. I found myself uncertain about the direction of this, yet I began to wonder if it truly held any significance. Perhaps it sufficed to simply embrace the present, allowing events to develop naturally. As the day wore on and Tom departed with his friends, Laura and I found ourselves on the porch, basking in the gentle embrace of the setting sun. Our conversations were few, yet the quiet moments we shared held a certain warmth that felt reassuring. It wasn't awkward, it was serene, as if our emotions transcended the need for words. After a moment of contemplation, Laura finally spoke, shattering the stillness. "I've been so absorbed in looking after everything and ensuring Tom is alright that I haven't truly dedicated any time to my own well-being. It's simple to overlook your own needs when you're always focused on supporting those around you." I gazed at her, a blend of admiration and worry swirling within me. "You've done so much for him," I remarked softly. "He is fortunate to have you." She smiled, yet a trace of melancholy lingered in her gaze. "Sometimes, I find myself longing for connection, feeling a deep sense of solitude. I understand I have Tom, but it feels different. A part of me still longs for, well, everything." I wasn't quite sure how to react to that, but I could certainly relate. It was evident how deeply she cared for Tom, how many sacrifices she had made for him, and how effortlessly she set aside her own needs along the way. "You're not alone, Laura," I said after a brief pause, my tone unwavering. "I have arrived. You don't need to face this alone." She gazed at me, her eyes gentle, and for an instant, I perceived a flicker within them, something beyond mere gratitude, something profound. Yet, she averted her gaze, a faint flush coloring her cheeks. "Thank you, Jason," she murmured softly, her voice just a breath above silence. "That holds greater significance for me than you might realize." We lingered for a bit longer, the sun sinking gradually on the horizon, and I came to understand that in that moment, my presence wasn't solely due to my friendship with Tom. I found myself here, drawn by a depth of feeling for her that surpassed what I had anticipated, a truth I wasn't quite prepared to confront. Perhaps it was finally time to cease the charade. Perhaps it was the moment to confront my true emotions. The sun hung low in the sky as we made the choice to retreat indoors. A peculiar blend of feelings stirred within me. A sense of ease, a thrill, and an elusive feeling that I couldn't fully articulate. It was a sensation that left me questioning whether I was stepping into a realm I wasn't prepared for, yet simultaneously, I felt an urge to embrace it rather than flee. As we strolled back to the house, an unspoken bond lingered between us, something that had blossomed during our time in the park. It felt as if we were both finally recognizing the unspoken tension that had been simmering beneath the surface. Even without words, I could sense its presence hanging in the air between us. Weighty and inescapable. "Dinner will be ready soon," Laura said, shattering the quiet as we stepped inside the front door. "Just a moment longer, and I'll be all set." I offered to lend a hand, more to break the silence than from any real need. Though my culinary skills were limited, extending the offer felt instinctive. Her smile radiated genuine appreciation. "There's no obligation, Jason, but I appreciate it. I'll finish this quickly." I lingered for a moment as she moved toward the kitchen. I observed her, the manner in which she glided, elegant yet somewhat weary. She exhibited a newfound vulnerability that was unfamiliar to me, evident in the way she now held herself. It was evident that she had faced numerous challenges, and I felt a strong desire to support her. But how is that possible? Doubt lingered, and that unease consumed me. After a brief moment, I entered the kitchen, finding Laura engaged in chopping vegetables. She hummed a soft melody beneath her breath, evidently absorbed in her own reflections. I hesitated to break the silence, yet the impulse to speak was too strong to resist. "Laura," I started, my voice with hesitation. "It's clear that you're really excelling at what you do. With Tom, with all that encompasses. You truly are." She took a brief moment, looking at me with a gentle smile. "Thanks, Jason. That holds significant value." I noticed how she relaxed, as if the burden she had been shouldering had lightened, even if just slightly. In moments like these, I understood just how much she craved a confidant, someone who would lend an ear without passing judgment. It wasn't about solving her issues, but about being there. "Are you aware?" She pressed on, placing the knife aside and carefully drying her hands on a towel. "I have dedicated so much of my time to ensuring others are satisfied that I have lost sight of my own needs. I seem to have lost touch with the art of self-care. Perhaps it's time to reconsider that," I remarked, presenting a modest yet genuine smile. "You don't have to carry the weight by yourself, Laura." Her gaze met mine, a probing intensity in her eyes, as though she were measuring the weight of my words. It was evident that she was torn. The notion of depending on another, of allowing herself to lean on me, was unfamiliar to her. I came to that realization. I had no intention of pressuring her into anything. Yet, I could sense that she was starting to place some trust in me, even if it was only a small amount. "I don't know," she murmured softly, her eyes falling to her hands. "It's simply challenging, you understand? After all that has happened, it's difficult to accept that I am worthy of anything positive." The intensity in her voice gripped my heart. The gravity of her words resonated with me, revealing the profound nature of her struggle. In that instant, it became clear to me how deeply I wished to support her, to demonstrate that she truly deserved joy. She was entitled to tranquility. "You truly deserve it," I stated, my tone resolute, yet tender. "Laura, you truly embody kindness. You've truly given a lot for Tom. For all. However, that doesn't imply you should neglect your own needs." She nodded slowly, her lips forming a tight line as she took in my words. It was evident she was still working through everything. However, I did not exert any pressure on her. I remained still, observing her, prepared to offer my assistance in any manner she required. "Allow me to complete dinner," she remarked, attempting to redirect the dialogue. "Your generosity in offering assistance is truly appreciated." I consented, although a part of me yearned to keep the dialogue going. Yet, I honored her limits, and I aimed to avoid inundating her. Instead, I subtly assisted her in preparing the meal, and we collaborated in a serene quietude. There was an undeniable serenity in this moment, a sense of unspoken connection that lingered between us. At last, when dinner was prepared, we gathered around the table. Tom had returned by this point, and we all eagerly began to enjoy the meal. The dialogue returned to light-hearted subjects, as was its usual pattern. Tom made light of his school projects, while Laura engaged in some playful banter with him. It was a pleasant, ordinary moment, one that I might have easily missed had I not been fully aware. Yet, I was fully engaged, and I observed the way Laura's gaze met mine from across the table. Her gaze wasn't particularly bold or intense, yet there was an intriguing quality in her eyes that drew me in. A gentle glow, a subtle intrigue. I couldn't help but reflect on her earlier words, how she had neglected to prioritize her own well-being. I pondered whether she genuinely understood the extent of her worthiness for happiness, for love. And I couldn't shake the feeling that perhaps I was beginning to perceive her in a new way, with greater clarity and depth. Not merely as Tom's mother, but as an individual in her own right, possessing her own needs and aspirations. As the last bite of dinner was savored, Tom politely took his leave to join some friends once more. As Laura and I sat together in the house, a thought crossed my mind: how long would this moment endure? For how long shall we maintain the facade that all is well, when the truth stands in stark contrast? I felt uncertain, yet I wasn't prepared to turn my back on the connection we were sharing. Not at this moment. "Consider the dinner," I remarked, sliding my plate away. You're welcome, she responded gently. She rose and began to clear the table, her motions remaining elegant, yet more measured now, as though the fatigue from the day had finally settled in. I assisted her, just as I had done before. It was straightforward, yet it seemed as though we were moving closer to something significant. Something profound, something beyond what either of us had anticipated. Once the last traces of the mess were cleared away, we sank into the couch, a serene stillness enveloping the space. Laura let out a soft sigh, leaning her head against the cushions. It's pleasant, you see, simply having someone around. I remained silent initially, allowing her words to linger in the atmosphere. Then I spoke, my voice soft yet sincere. It brings me joy to be here, Laura. I truly am. She tilted her head just enough to lock eyes with me. In her eyes, there was a depth that transcended mere words, and in that instant, I understood that perhaps this journey was about more than simply guiding her through her challenges. Perhaps it was about something deeper, something neither of us had anticipated. A few days had passed since we discussed Laura's challenges. There was an undeniable shift in the air between us, an intangible change that eluded my ability to articulate. A quiet transformation lingered, an unspoken recognition that hung between us whenever we shared the same space. The sensation was palpable, and I was convinced she sensed it as well. Tom had ventured out with his friends once more, leaving Laura and me to our solitude in the house. Though it had happened before, this instance carried a unique weight. A subtle tension lingered in the atmosphere, as if we were both anticipating an unspoken moment, though neither of us dared to voice it. As I lounged in the living room, my attention drifting over the screen of my phone, Laura entered, cradling a steaming cup of tea. She had a remarkable ability to light up the space around her, and I couldn't help but observe how relaxed she appeared today. She moved with a calm focus, undeterred by haste or distraction. She existed fully, immersed in the present. Care for a cup of tea? She inquired, her tone gentle yet inviting. I lifted my eyes, locking onto her gaze. Absolutely, I would be delighted to have some. With a gentle smile, she approached the table and placed the cup before me. For a brief instant, we remained silent, each of us hesitant about the words that might follow. The quiet hung in the air, not awkward, but more substantial than normal. It felt as if we were both aware that something was shifting in our relationship, yet we were at a loss for how to confront it. Laura finally shattered the stillness, her voice soft yet unwavering. I've been reflecting on our recent conversation regarding my tendency to prioritize others over my own needs. I nodded, placing my phone aside. It's great to see you considering it. It's important for you to prioritize your well-being, Laura. You've faced many challenges. She locked eyes with me, her gaze piercing yet inviting. A newfound fragility shimmered in her eyes, stirring a gentle ache within my heart. She transcended the role of merely being Tom's mother. She was an individual with her own desires, her own challenges. I've consistently prioritized the needs of others. She pressed on, her voice becoming more delicate. And I find myself at a loss, unsure of what it might feel like to prioritize my own needs for a change. You don't have to do it alone, I murmured, a sense of uncertainty surrounding the origin of my words, yet they resonated deeply within me. I have arrived, Laura. There's no need to shoulder all the burdens by yourself. She inhaled slowly, seemingly absorbing my words. After a moment of silence, she took a seat opposite me, her hands gently placed on her lap. I appreciate that, she said, her voice soft and almost inaudible. I'm unsure of how to seek assistance. It feels as though I've lost touch with the sensation of allowing someone else to enter my world. I extended my hand across the table, uncertain of my motives, yet compelled to offer her some comfort. No need to ask, Laura. All you need to do is simply be present. Allow me to be present for you. She gazed at me, and for an extended moment, it seemed as though all else in the universe dissolved into nothingness. The quietness that enveloped us felt comfortable. It was brimming with insight. Gradually, she inclined her head, as though arriving at a conclusion, a choice that had burdened her for an extended period. Thank you, she murmured, her voice quivering ever so slightly. It seems I truly required that insight more than I understood. I could perceive the depth of feeling in her gaze, a subtle blend of appreciation and lingering doubt. Her efforts were significant, and that held more value for me than anything else. I was taken aback when she unexpectedly revealed so much, yet I sensed a change within her, a slight fissure in the barrier she'd constructed around her emotions. After that, words were scarce. We exchanged a few subtle smiles and savored our tea in silence. Though it was small, it seemed like a move in the right direction. After a considerable period, it seemed as though we were both embracing our vulnerability naturally, without any sense of obligation. Eventually, the discussion shifted to more cheerful subjects, and the comfort between us re-emerged. We exchanged thoughts on trivial matters, Tom's recent antics at school, my weekend aspirations, and various musings about existence. Yet, amidst the casual conversation, an unvoiced connection lingered between us, a presence neither of us could overlook. As the evening unfolded, we found ourselves on the porch, gazing at the sun as it dipped below the horizon. The tranquility of the moment enveloped me, and I felt an undeniable sense of belonging, as if I had found my rightful place in the world. It wasn't solely about the romantic feelings I experienced, although I couldn't ignore their presence. It was primarily about this fresh connection we shared, one that transcended the need for verbal expression. After a while, Laura broke the comfortable silence, expressing her happiness about the time they had been spending together. I believe it has been beneficial for us both. I nodded, feeling a weight in my chest that hadn't been there before. I concur. It seems as though we are both discovering something fresh and intriguing. She offered a faint, bittersweet smile while gazing at the horizon. Indeed, it seems that way. We lingered in quietude for a moment more, the crisp evening breeze enveloping us. In moments like these, I sensed a deepening connection between us, one that felt more profound than ever before. There were no sweeping statements, no unexpected insights. The bond between us was quietly deepening, unfolding with each passing moment. Even in the uncertainty of what lay ahead, I found it impossible to ignore the flicker of hope within me. I felt a sense of optimism that we were both prepared to embark on a new journey, even in the absence of complete clarity. I appreciate your presence, Jason, Laura said gently, interrupting my reverie. I believe I may not express that as often as I should. Our eyes locked, a silent exchange unfolding between us. No need for thanks, Laura. It brings me joy to be present in this moment. In that fleeting moment, as we lingered in the dimming glow, it dawned on me that no matter what lay ahead, we would confront it side by side. An unvoiced connection lingered between us, a subtle comprehension that would influence the course of what was to come. For the time being, that sufficed. The following days unfolded in a haze, each one seeming to stretch endlessly while simultaneously racing by with unsettling speed. It struck me how significantly my time with Laura had increased. She began to share more, not only the minor details but also her profound challenges, the ones she seldom discussed. Every dialogue we shared deepened the bond between us, making it feel increasingly authentic and substantial. On a serene Saturday afternoon, the shift became unmistakable. Tom had stepped out to spend time with some friends, leaving just the two of us in the living room once more. Laura sat on the couch, a book in her hands, yet it was clear her thoughts wandered elsewhere. My gaze was drawn to her as she turned the pages with a certain grace. Her brow knitted together in focus, yet a faraway gaze lingered in her eyes, as if she were adrift in contemplation. For a brief moment, I paused before finding my words. Laura, are you all right? She glanced up from her book, momentarily taken aback, before offering me a gentle smile. Indeed, I'm doing well. Lost in thought. Concerning what topic? I inquired as I took a seat next to her. A part of me hesitated to inquire, fearing she might withdraw into her shell, yet the urge to delve deeper, to comprehend, was undeniable. She let out a small sigh, setting the book down with a casual flick of her wrist. Simply all of it. Your words from the other night have been on my mind. On the subject of self-care. I leaned in a bit, completely focused on her. So? What are your thoughts on it? She released a gentle chuckle, yet it carried a hint of melancholy. I've dedicated so much energy to keeping everything in order that I've lost sight of simply being myself. At times, I find myself questioning whether I've strayed from my true self throughout this journey. Her words wrapped around my heart, squeezing it tightly. The wavering quality of her voice revealed a deep sense of uncertainty and vulnerability. I recognized that feeling intimately. While I couldn't claim to fully understand her struggles, the burden was evident in her gaze. And I despised it. She despised the weight of her burdens. "You haven't lost yourself, Laura," I said gently. "You're simply making your way through life as best as you can. Amidst the whirlwind of duties, it's important to remember that your essence remains intact. You possess great strength. You have consistently demonstrated remarkable strength." She pivoted her head, locking eyes with me. Her eyes softened, and for an instant, I could have sworn there was a glimmer of something profound within them. Yet it dissipated just as swiftly as it emerged, giving way to a soft smile. "Thank you, Jason," she murmured, her voice scarcely audible. "You truly have no idea what it feels like to experience that." We lingered in quietude for a moment, allowing the words to float in the atmosphere. The distance between us seemed to shrink, and a profound understanding began to unfold. Yet, there was an additional element present as well. An unarticulated tension lingered between us, a reality neither of us dared to face. Yet, in spite of everything, we both understood it was expanding. The doorbell chimed, breaking the stillness of the moment. Tom returned sooner than expected, providing a refreshing diversion. I sought a distraction to alleviate the tumult of feelings churning within me. "I'll take care of it," I declared, rising swiftly and making my way to the door. As I opened it, I was met with Tom's bright and cheerful voice. "Hey, Jason, are you tied up right now?" "Not in the slightest," I replied, moving aside to allow him entry. "Hello there." He mentioned, almost nonchalantly, that he was considering going out later with a few friends. "Are you interested in joining? I'm in need of some companionship." I paused, casting a look at Laura, who remained seated on the couch. I noticed her observing us, even as she pretended to be engrossed in her phone. A part of me longed to remain by her side, yet I was acutely aware that I could not escape the truth of our circumstances. It had evolved beyond merely sharing moments with Laura. I was discovering my place within this intricate, ever-changing landscape. "I suppose I could," I replied, glancing back at Tom. "Allow me a moment to retrieve my jacket." As I walked down the hallway, I sensed Laura's gaze upon me. Uncertainty lingered in the air. I couldn't quite discern whether she wished for my presence or was merely watching, yet the atmosphere felt distinctly altered. Her gaze held a subtle intensity, an unspoken anticipation that eluded my understanding. It caused a slight constriction in my chest. Upon my return, Tom stood by the door, brimming with anticipation to depart. I offered Laura a brief wave, preferring to keep things low-key. "Enjoy yourself," Laura exclaimed with a grin, yet there was a subtle undertone lurking beneath her words. Uncertainty clouded my thoughts. Was it disappointment or something altogether different? I found it best not to dwell on it too deeply. I needed to concentrate on the immediate reality before me. The evening spent with Tom and his friends provided a welcome distraction, yet even in the midst of laughter and light-hearted chatter, my mind continually wandered back to Laura. A sense of inevitability hung in the air, as if the dynamics between us were subtly transforming, leaving me at a loss for how to intervene. Upon my return later that night, the house lay in stillness. Tom had retired for the night, while Laura remained at the kitchen table, cradling a warm cup of tea in her hands. As I stepped inside, she glanced up, a subtle smile gracing her lips. "Did you enjoy yourself?" she inquired, her tone gentle. "Indeed," I responded, even though it felt as if I were being untruthful. It felt refreshing to step outside. Laura nodded, her expression contemplative. "I'm pleased. It's wonderful to see you venturing out. It's important for you to enjoy yourself as well." A moment of silence lingered before I found my words once more. "Laura, have you ever contemplated what might unfold if circumstances were altered?" She blinked, evidently taken aback by the inquiry. "Could you clarify what you mean?" If we weren't simply in our current situation? Had circumstances taken another turn? Her expression transformed in that moment. A barrier seemed to rise before her, and I could perceive the uncertainty reflected in her gaze. Jason. Indeed. She caught herself, her teeth grazing her lip. Your message seems unclear to me. I'm not aiming to create any confusion. I spoke hastily, aware of how my words could have been interpreted. I'm feeling a bit lost, to be honest. It seems as though circumstances have shifted. I find myself uncertain about my place in all of this. Laura observed me intently, and I could sense the turmoil reflected in her gaze. Her silence was eloquent, conveying more than words ever could. After a moment of contemplation, she let out a sigh and rose to her feet, making her way to the window. Everything has changed, Jason. However, that doesn't imply we can simply proceed with it. We must consider every detail with great care. I nodded, grasping the significance of her words. Absolutely, I understand. We lingered in silence, each of us uncertain about the next step to take. However, one thing stood out unmistakably. Everything had changed. A few days had passed since we last spoke. The quiet that lingered between Laura and me had deepened, but it held a certain ease. The silence enveloped us, a shared moment of contemplation as we both navigated our thoughts, seeking clarity on the path ahead. Changes had occurred, yet neither of us felt prepared to hastily make any choices. Time was essential, and I sensed that deeply. Yet, time had a peculiar manner of advancing when you were least prepared for it. During those brief days, I discovered that I was increasingly drawn to spending time with Laura. Not with any intention to advance anything, but simply because it felt organic. We prepared meals side by side, enjoyed films, and engaged in conversations that ranged from the profound to the trivial. It was the little moments that held significance in this time. On a Wednesday evening, the situation took yet another unforeseen twist. Tom found himself at a friend's place, while I lounged in the living room, casually browsing through a magazine. Laura entered the room, balancing 2 cups of tea, and offered one to me. Thank you, I replied, accepting the cup from her hand. Our fingers touched for just a moment, and in that fleeting instant, I experienced the same spark as before. I swiftly retracted my hand, feigning ignorance, even as my heart raced slightly faster. Laura appeared unfazed. She settled next to me, folding her legs beneath her. I've been contemplating, she started, her tone more earnest than typical. In light of our recent conversations, I turned to her, feeling my heart race in response. Indeed, she inclined her head gradually, her gaze fixed on the cup cradled in her hands. I'm not sure if I've shared this before, but I've been so absorbed in holding everything together for such a long time that I've lost touch with what it means to simply be myself. I'm uncertain about what that resembles now, yet I yearn to discover it. Her words struck a chord within me, causing my chest to tighten as I understood their true meaning. I had devoted so much time to evading my own emotions, to distancing myself from the deepening bond between us, that I had lost sight of how much I yearned to support her. It transcended mere assistance, it became a commitment to stand by her side, offering unwavering support in every way she required. There's no need to solve it all in one go, I murmured gently. Your contemplation indicates that you're heading in the right direction. Her smile was small yet genuine, causing my heart to swell with warmth. I'm uncertain about diving into significant changes at this moment, but I believe it's time to begin the journey. Beginning with oneself is indeed a wise choice, I remarked, my tone earnest. We lingered in that moment, sipping our tea, allowing the conversation to float gently around us. There was a certain tranquility in the air, in the experience of occupying this serene, collective environment. It felt as though we had arrived at a moment where we could truly express our thoughts and feelings, free from the worry of being judged. After a brief pause, Laura placed her cup on the coffee table and turned to look at me. Jason, I truly appreciate your support. Your support has meant more to me than you might understand. I lowered my gaze, feeling a twinge of embarrassment at her remarks. I'm simply acting as anyone else would. No, she replied, her gaze unwavering. You stand out from the crowd. You've paid attention. You've always been present in my moments of need, even in times when I was unaware of that need. That holds a significance for me that you might never fully grasp. The genuine quality of her voice caught me off guard. I had always recognized her strength, but listening to her express those thoughts unveiled the immense weight she bore alone. In moments like these, I perceived her not merely as Tom's mom, but as Laura, a woman who had endured so much, brimming with heart and untapped potential. I felt a sense of relief to be here for you, I murmured softly. A lengthy silence hung between us, a moment where words eluded both of us. Yet, it was not unpleasant. It seemed as though we were both finally reaching an understanding of our situation, each of us unsure about what lay ahead, yet ready to confront it side by side. In that instant, I sensed a change in the air between us once more. Before I had the chance to utter another word, Laura rose to her feet, her eyes shining with intensity. I believe I shall embark on a stroll. Step outside for a breath of fresh air. I arched an eyebrow, taken aback by the unexpected shift in course. A stroll. With a nod, she made her way to the door. Absolutely, I believe it will provide me with some mental clarity. Would you like to join me? For just a brief moment, I paused before rising to my feet. Absolutely, that sounds good. As we strolled together through the serene neighborhood, the evening air wrapped around us, cool and refreshing against my skin. The streets lay nearly deserted, interrupted only by the rare passage of a car. It was serene, and for the first time in ages, I sensed a freedom to inhale deeply. Initially, our conversations were sparse. The stillness that enveloped us felt comfortable. It felt cozy. Yet, as we strolled, a change occurred once more. Laura eased her speed, and I matched her rhythm, letting the distance between us diminish just a bit more. After a moment of silence, she spoke, her voice gentle and contemplative. Regarding our conversation from the other evening. Considering the possibilities of change. My heart raced, yet I maintained a calm tone. I'm not quite sure what this is, Jason. She pressed on, her gaze locking with mine. I'm uncertain about the direction it's heading, yet I refuse to maintain the facade that everything is perfectly alright when it clearly isn't. We can no longer overlook the situation unfolding between us. Her words lingered in the atmosphere, and I became aware that I had been suspending my breath. Uncertainty lingered in my mind, yet I understood that I couldn't allow this moment to pass without expressing my true feelings. I also don't wish to overlook it. I declared at last, my tone unwavering. I'm uncertain about what lies ahead, Laura. However, I wish to explore this together with you. She smiled then, a warm, sincere smile. In that instant, clarity washed over me. I sensed that this marked the dawn of an exciting chapter. Something genuine. It was never about hurrying ahead or imposing anything. It was about embracing the journey, letting each moment reveal itself in due course. As we rounded the corner and made our way back to the house, a sense of relief washed over me. Nothing was flawless, nor would it ever be. For the first time in ages, I sensed that I was precisely where I was meant to be.